This is VOA News, reporting by remote. I'm David Byrd. There's been no apparent movement in the Ukraine standoff after the top American and Russian diplomats met in Switzerland. AP's Sagar Magani reports.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken didn't expect any major breakthroughs with the Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, and there weren't, but he says the meeting was useful.
I believe that Foreign Minister Lavrov now has a better understanding of our position. And vice versa.
Blinken says Lavrov repeated Russia has no intention of invading Ukraine, but with an estimated 100,000 troops massed near the border.
We're looking at what is visible to all.
And Russia's actions will make the difference. Blinken again said an invasion would merit a swift and severe response. Lavrov says Blinken promised written responses to Russian demands, including some America and its allies have already flatly dismissed. Sagar Magani, Washington.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Friday used their first formal meeting to discuss concerns about China's growing military assertiveness that's spurring increasing disquiet in the Pacific. Kishida said the two leaders spent a significant amount of their 80-minute call on issues surrounding China, including shared concerns about Beijing's increasing aggression toward Taiwan. China claims self-governing Taiwan as its own territory to be annexed by force if necessary. In recent months, Beijing has stepped up military exercises near the island, frequently sending warplanes near Taiwan's airspace. Biden and Kishida also discussed the situations in Hong Kong and China's western Xinjiang province. The virtual meeting came as North Korea earlier this week suggested it might resume nuclear and long-range missile testing that has been paused for more than 3 years. This is VOA News. A U.S. judge in Texas has issued a nationwide injunction barring the federal government from enforcing President Joe Biden's requirement that federal workers without qualifying medical or religious exemptions be vaccinated for COVID-19. Judge Jeffrey Brown ruled Friday that opponents of Biden's vaccination mandate for federal workers were likely to succeed at trial and blocked the government from enforcing the requirement. Jen Psaki is the White House press secretary.
98% of federal workers are vaccinated. That is a remarkable number. I would point you to the Department of Justice on any next steps, but obviously we are confident in our legal authority here.
Biden announced in September that more than 3.5 million federal workers were required to undergo vaccination unless they secured approved medical or religious exemptions. The Justice Department says it will appeal the judge's ruling. The state of Arizona is suing the Biden administration over federal COVID-19 relief money. AP's Mike Hempen reports.
The lawsuit filed in federal court is over the administration's demand that Arizona stop sending millions in federal COVID-19 relief money to schools that don't have mask requirements or that close due to COVID-19 outbreaks. The lawsuit follows a Treasury Department demand that Arizona Governor Doug Ducey either restructure the $163 million program to eliminate restrictions it says undermine public health recommendations or face a repayment demand. Ducey's lawsuit claims the Treasury Department created the restrictions without legal authority. Mike Hempen, Washington.
Members of the Islamic State group have launched two sophisticated deadly attacks in Syria and Iraq, including an attempt to break into a prison where suspected extremists are being held by U.S.-backed fighters. Iraqi and Syrian officials and activists said Friday's attacks left 11 Iraqi soldiers dead and at least 7 U.S.-backed Syrian fighters. At least 23 IS gunmen were also killed when about 100 extremists tried to storm a prison in northeast Syria housing about 3,000 suspected militants, including former IS commanders. The attacks are believed to be the largest since Islamic State lost the final sliver of land it held nearly 3 years ago. On Wall Street, stocks extended their losses as major indexes finished with another weekly loss. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 1.3%, while the S&P 500 dropped 1.9%. The Nasdaq lost 2.7%. Reporting by remote, I'm David Byrd, VOA.
Katie Weaver. Thanks for listening.
This is VOA News. Reporting by remote, I'm David Byrd. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Saturday he had authorized the Baltic nations of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to send U.S.-made anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine. We get more from AP's Karen Chamas.
The U.S. has fully endorsed the move. Secretary of State Antony Blinken tweeted that Washington supported the nations of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania for their long-standing support to Ukraine against what he calls Russia's unprovoked and irresponsible aggression. Moscow has massed tens of thousands of troops at the border with Ukraine, leading to fears of an invasion. Viktor Pichugin, a local resident on the Ukrainian side of the border, says tensions are high.
Like on the edge of something very terrible and scary.
Another local resident, Yulia Naporska, says Ukraine will defend itself at all costs.
If someone tries to take our freedom again, we will fight back.
I'm Karen Chamas.
Fighting raged for a third day Saturday between the Islamic State group and Kurdish forces in Syria after IS attacked a prison housing jihadists, with the violence killing nearly 90 people. The assault on the prison in the northern city of Hasaka is one of IS's most significant since its so-called caliphate was declared defeated in Syria nearly 3 years ago. The head of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Rami Abdel Rahman, said at least 28 members of the Kurdish security forces, 5 civilians, and 56 members of IS have been killed in the violence. The Islamic State group launched the attack on Thursday night against a prison housing at least 3,500 suspected members of the jihadist group, including some of its leaders. Hundreds of jihadist inmates have been recaptured since the attack, but dozens were still believed to be on the loose. This is VOA News. Saturday was a day of protests against COVID-19 restrictions across Europe, with demonstrations in Helsinki, Athens, London, Paris, and Stockholm. Protesters took to the streets of central London to demonstrate against regulations requiring mandatory COVID-19 vaccination for British National Health Service workers. Thousands rallied in Paris against France's vaccine pass 2 days before the new measure takes effect. The French Constitutional Council on Friday approved with conditions the pass, which will require people aged 16 and above to show proof of vaccination to enter public places like bars, restaurants, and cinemas. In Stockholm, about 9,000 people marched through the streets chanting no to vaccine passes, yes to freedom. The Scandinavian country introduced the passes on December 1st. They have been mandatory since January 12th for indoor events of more than 50 people as the country battles an unprecedented surge of infections with around 40,000 cases reported per day in the past week. Experts say China's zero-tolerance virus strategy could drag out the pandemic in that country. We get more from AP's Jennifer King.
Most experts say the coronavirus isn't going away and believe it could eventually become endemic like the flu through infections and vaccines. The theory is that the virus is running out of people to infect, but experts worry that China is not seeing the same dynamic. The government's uncompromising approach has protected hospitals and prevented deaths, but it also means most people in China have never been exposed to the virus. New studies suggest China's most widely used vaccines offer significantly less protection than the leading Western vaccines against the Omicron variant. Immunologists say that if the country of 1.4 billion people were to relax restrictions, it could face a terrible surge despite a highly vaccinated population. I'm Jennifer King.
The debate over masking children in U.S. schools is heating up across the country. AP's Julie Walker reports.
Arizona's Republican Governor Doug Ducey suing the Biden administration over its demand the state stop sending millions in federal COVID relief money to schools that don't have mask requirements or that close due to outbreaks. In Virginia, Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin says he's confident his administration will win a court battle over his executive order allowing parents to opt out of school mask mandates. But he advised parents to listen to their principal until the court issues its ruling. Meanwhile, experts still stress mask wearing. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky.
Cases are still well higher than the threshold to start thinking about taking off some of those measures.
I'm Julie Walker.
Visit voanews.com for more. Reporting by